The ships arrived on a Tuesday morning while Marcus was in chemistry class. They didn't announce themselves with dramatic displays of power or threatening messages. Instead, 3 sleek vessels simply appeared in Earth's atmosphere, their hulls reflecting light in ways that hurt to look at directly. Marcus first knew something was wrong when Cosmos started pacing frantically around his bedroom, scales shifting through rapid color changes that seemed to indicate panic. The dragon had been growing stronger every day, now roughly the size of a medium dog, with wings that could almost support short flights. By the time Marcus got home from school, news stations around the world were reporting the same story. 3 unidentified aircraft had taken positions above major population centers: New York, London, and Tokyo. They weren't responding to any attempts at communication, but they also weren't showing any hostile intent. Marcus found Cosmos hiding in the closet, trembling with fear. "They found me," the dragon whispered, its voice much clearer now after weeks of practice. "The Kethvar. They never stop hunting." "Who are the Kethvar?" Marcus asked, kneeling beside his frightened friend. Cosmos's scales turned the color of dried blood. "Slavers. They steal children from worlds across the galaxy, sell them to whoever pays most. Some buy for work, some for worse things." Marcus felt sick. "And they're here for you?" "Not just me anymore," Cosmos said, looking up with eyes full of worry. "They will want to know how human freed dragon, how human made dragon strong again. They will want to study you." The implication hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. By saving Cosmos, he had painted a target not just on himself, but potentially on all of humanity. That evening, the ships finally made contact. Every television, radio, and internet-connected device on Earth simultaneously broadcast the same message in perfect, unaccented English. "Greetings, primitive species. We are the Kethvar Collective. We have detected stolen property in your possession. Surrender the dragon youngling immediately, and we will depart without consequence to your world. Refuse, and we will take what is ours by force." The message repeated in every language on Earth, then cut off, leaving the world in stunned silence. Marcus watched the broadcast with his parents, his heart hammering in his chest. His father was a quiet accountant who solved problems with spreadsheets. His mother fixed sick animals. Neither of them was prepared for alien contact, much less an ultimatum. "This is insane," his mother said, staring at the blank television screen. "Are they talking about some kind of pet? Who would have an alien dragon?" Marcus excused himself and ran upstairs to find Cosmos floating 6 inches off the floor, scales cycling through colors too quickly to follow. "I have to go back," Cosmos said without preamble. "Cannot let them hurt your people because of me." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Absolutely not. You said yourself what they do to dragons. I won't let them take you." "You do not understand," Cosmos replied, settling back onto the floor. "Kethvar have weapons that can break worlds. They have armies of stolen children turned into soldiers. They will not hesitate to destroy your entire species for one dragon." Marcus sat on his bed, mind racing. There has to be another way. What if we told them you died? Or that you escaped? Cosmos shook its head sadly. "They can sense life force. Know I am here, growing stronger. They also know something impossible happened. Dragons do not heal from Kethvar chains, not without—" It paused, struggling with the concept. "Without love." "Pure love? Love?" "What you gave me," Cosmos explained, scales shifting to warm gold. "Kindness without wanting anything back. Healing without hurting. Kethvar do not understand this. They think love is weakness. They are wrong, but they do not know they are wrong." That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept thinking about Cosmos's words, about love being something the Kethvar didn't understand. An idea was forming in his mind, crazy and dangerous, but possibly their only hope. The next morning brought chaos. World leaders were demanding answers nobody had. Military forces were mobilizing, though everyone knew conventional weapons would be useless against technology that could cross interstellar space. Panic was spreading as people realized they were completely helpless. Then Marcus did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He called the local news station. "My name is Marcus Chen," he told the confused reporter who answered. "I'm 16 years old and I have the dragon they're looking for." Within an hour, his house was surrounded by news vans, government agents, and crowds of curious neighbors. Marcus sat on his front porch with Cosmos beside him, both of them facing a wall of cameras and microphones. Cosmos had chosen to show itself in its full beauty, scales shimmering like liquid starlight, Wings spread wide despite the injuries still healing. The sight of an actual dragon left the crowd speechless. 3 weeks ago, I found Cosmos chained up and dying in an alley, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. Someone had tortured him, left him to die. I took him home and took care of him because it was the right thing to do. Agent Morrison from the FBI stepped forward. Son, you need to come with us. This is a matter of national security. No, Marcus said simply. This is a matter of doing what's right. He looked directly into the main news camera. I know the Kethvar are watching. I know you can hear this. You want Cosmos back? Come down here and ask me for him. Face to face. Let's talk about this like civilized beings. The crowd erupted in shouting. Agent Morrison reached for his radio. Marcus's parents looked horrified, but Cosmos nuzzled against Marcus's hand and said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up, Marcus is bravest human in galaxy. Kethvar will learn why humans are feared. Feared? Agent Morrison asked sharply. What does that mean? Cosmos looked up at him with ancient eyes. You do not know yet what you are, but Galaxy does. Humans are only species that fights for others without reward. Only species that shows kindness to enemies. Kethvar think this makes you weak. The dragon's scale shifted to brilliant silver. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Above them, the 3 ships began to descend. The real confrontation was about to begin, and Marcus had just ensured it would happen on his front lawn, broadcast live to the entire world. He squeezed Cosmos's claw gently. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The ships landed in the street with impossible grace, their hulls reflecting the crowd like funhouse mirrors. Hatches opened with sounds like sighing wind. The Kethvar had come to collect their property. They had no idea they were about to meet humanity. Marcus slipped through his bedroom window just as his parents finished watching the late news downstairs. The dragon lay motionless in his arms, barely breathing. Under the harsh fluorescent light of his desk lamp, the creature looked even worse than it had in the alley. The dragon's scales were dull and cracked, some missing entirely where the chains had rubbed raw wounds. Its wings hung at odd angles, and Marcus could see old fractures that had healed wrong. Whoever had chained this creature hadn't just imprisoned it, they had tortured it. Marcus cleared his desk and gently laid the dragon on a folded blanket. The creature's eyes tracked his movements, but it made no sound. It had learned that making noise brought pain. Working as quietly as possible, Marcus gathered supplies from around the house. Antiseptic from the bathroom cabinet, gauze and medical tape from the first aid kit, and warm water in a plastic bowl. His mother was a veterinarian, and Marcus had watched her treat injured animals hundreds of times. But this was no ordinary animal. As Marcus cleaned the wounds, the dragon's scales began to change color, shifting from dull black to deep purple wherever his gentle touch passed. The creature seemed to draw strength from human contact in a way that defied explanation. The worst injuries were on the dragon's neck where the collar had been. The metal had left burns that looked infected, surrounded by strange patterns that seemed to move when Marcus wasn't looking directly at them. When he applied antiseptic, the patterns hissed and faded like smoke. Marcus worked through the night, cleaning wounds and wrapping the dragon's injured wing. The creature never tried to bite or scratch, even when Marcus knew his treatment must have hurt. Those ancient golden eyes watched him with an intelligence that made his skin crawl. This wasn't just a smart animal. This was a person. As dawn approached, the dragon's breathing had improved dramatically. Its scales now gleamed with health, and it had even managed to eat some of the raw hamburger Marcus had snuck from the kitchen. But the most remarkable change was in its eyes. The hopeless resignation was gone, replaced by growing trust and something that looked like affection. Marcus had fallen asleep at his desk when his phone alarm went off for school. He woke to find the dragon had somehow climbed onto his chest and was sleeping curled against his neck. Its scales were warm, and Marcus could feel a faint vibration like a cat's purr. "Morning, buddy," Marcus whispered, gently stroking the dragon's head. The creature opened one golden eye and made a soft chirping sound that might have been contentment. Getting ready for school while hiding a dragon proved challenging. Marcus managed to set up a comfortable nest in his closet with blankets and a heating pad. He left water and more food, though he had no idea what dragons normally ate. "Stay quiet, okay?" Marcus told the dragon as he prepared to leave. "I'll be back this afternoon." The dragon seemed to understand, settling into the blankets with a tired sigh. School passed in a blur. Marcus couldn't concentrate on anything except the magical creature hidden in his bedroom. During lunch, he researched dragon care on his phone, though most of the information was clearly fictional. Nothing prepared him for the reality of caring for an actual dragon. When he finally returned home, Marcus found his bedroom transformed. The dragon had somehow multiplied the plants on his windowsill. Where there had been one dying fern, now dozens of healthy green shoots sprouted from every available pot. The air smelled like rainfall and growing things. The dragon itself looked completely different. Its scales now shimmered with health, shifting through colors Marcus had never seen before. The creature had grown noticeably larger, and its injured wing was already showing signs of healing. "How did you do that?" Marcus asked, gesturing at the plants. The dragon chirped and touched one of the new shoots with its nose. The plant immediately grew taller, unfurling perfect leaves. The dragon looked up at Marcus with what could only be described as pride. Over the following days, Marcus established a routine. School during the day, then hours spent with the dragon in the evening. He learned that the creature loved music, especially classical pieces. It would curl up on Marcus's bed and listen with obvious pleasure, its scales shifting colors in time with the melody. The dragon was incredibly intelligent. It learned to respond to its name, Cosmos, which Marcus chose because of the way its scales looked like a starfield at night. It understood complex commands and even seemed to grasp human emotions, offering comfort when Marcus was stressed about upcoming exams. But Cosmos was also clearly not from Earth. Sometimes Marcus would wake to find the dragon floating 3 feet above the bed, fast asleep in midair. The creature could make plants grow with a touch, heal small cuts by breathing on them, and its eyes could see things that weren't there, or perhaps things that were there but invisible to human sight. Marcus started keeping a journal of Cosmos's abilities. The dragon could purify water by dipping its claw into it. It could sense electrical devices from across the room and seemed to absorb energy from them. Most remarkably, it appeared to be learning English, responding not just to tone but to actual words. 2 weeks after the rescue, Cosmos spoke its first word. Marcus was doing homework when he heard a small, clear voice say, "Thank you." He spun around to find Cosmos sitting on the windowsill, bathed in moonlight. The dragon's scales were pure silver, and its eyes held a depth of gratitude that made Marcus's throat tighten. "You can talk?" Marcus whispered. "Learning," Cosmos replied, the words slightly slurred but unmistakable. "From you, from kindness." Marcus sat down hard on his bed. The talking alien dragon, in his bedroom, that he had rescued from what was clearly some kind of torture. "Who did this to you?" Marcus asked. "Who chained you up like that?" Cosmos's scales darkened a deep red, and its eyes flashed with anger. "Hunters," it said. "Take young ones. Sell to bad places. For fights, for experiments." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Cosmos had been captured as a baby and sold to people who used dragons for entertainment or worse. The collar had been designed to keep it weak and compliant. "Where are you from?" Marcus asked gently. Cosmos turned to look out the window at the stars. "Far," it said simply. "Home was beautiful." Before the hunters came, Marcus felt a surge of anger so strong it surprised him. The idea of anyone hurting Cosmos, of reducing this magnificent creature to a broken toy for cruel entertainment, made his fist clench. "They won't find you here," Marcus promised. "I won't let them." Cosmos looked at him with those ancient eyes and said something that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. "They will come. Humans not supposed to free dragons, not supposed to care. They will be confused, angry." Outside, unknown to both of them, ships moved silently through Earth's solar system. Scanners that had been tracking a missing piece of valuable property had finally detected their target. The hunters were coming. Marcus Chen kicked a rusty can down the abandoned alley behind his school, the metallic clatter echoing off crumbling walls. The 16-year-old had taken this shortcut 1,000 times, but today felt different. A strange humming filled the air, like electricity before a storm. The sound grew stronger as he approached the old warehouse district. Steam rose from manholes and the streetlights flickered with an eerie blue glow. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter against the unusual chill that seemed to seep into his bones. Then he saw it. Behind a dumpster, partially hidden by fallen debris, lay something that made his heart stop. At first glance, it looked like a large dog wrapped in chains, but as Marcus crept closer, his eyes widened in disbelief. The creature had scales that shimmered like oil on water, shifting between deep purple and midnight black. 4 legs ended in claws that could easily tear through steel, and along its back ran a ridge of small spines. It was a dragon. An actual dragon, no bigger than a golden retriever puppy. The creature's breathing was shallow and labored. Thick metal chains bound its legs and wings, connected to a heavy collar around its neck. The metal looked alien, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Where the chains touched the dragon's skin, angry red welts had formed. Marcus approached slowly, his sneakers crunching on broken glass. The dragon's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises like molten gold. Those ancient eyes held intelligence, pain, and something that made Marcus's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. The creature was dying. Without thinking, Marcus knelt beside the wounded being. The dragon tried to lift its head but collapsed back onto the cold concrete with a whimper that sounded almost human. Its scales had lost their luster, and Marcus could see its ribs through the thin skin. "Hey there," Marcus whispered, reaching out carefully. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon's eyes tracked his movement but showed no fear, only resignation. It had given up hope long ago. Marcus examined the chains more closely. They weren't made of any metal he recognized. The surface felt wrong against his fingers, too smooth and somehow alive. Strange runes carved into each link pulsed with a faint red light. When he touched them, images flashed through his mind. Vast ships in space, beings with too many arms pointing weapons, and this same dragon soaring through alien skies. The collar was the worst part. It had grown into the dragon's neck, the metal fusing with flesh in a way that made Marcus feel sick. Whoever had done this had meant for it to be permanent. They had wanted the dragon to suffer. Marcus pulled out his phone to call for help, but the screen showed no signal. The strange energy in the air was interfering with electronics. He was on his own. Looking around the alley, Marcus spotted an old toolbox someone had left behind. Inside, he found a crowbar and some heavy-duty wire cutters. The tools felt inadequate against the alien restraints, but he had to try something. As he worked, the dragon watched him with growing curiosity. Each time Marcus made progress on a chain, the creature's breathing seemed to improve slightly. The runes on the metal grew brighter as he struggled with them, as if fighting back. After 20 minutes of careful work, Marcus managed to free one of the dragon's front legs. The moment the chain fell away, the creature flexed its claws and a small puff of silver flame escaped its nostrils. The dragon looked surprised by its own action, as if it had forgotten it could breathe fire. Encouraged, Marcus continued working. The wire cutters sparked against the alien metal, sending up showers of strange blue sparks. His hands were getting cut up from the sharp edges, but he didn't stop. Something deep inside him knew this was important, bigger than just helping an injured animal. When he freed the dragon's wings, the creature tried to spread them but winced in pain. The wings were beautiful but damaged, with tears in the delicate membrane between the bones. It would be a long time before this dragon could fly again. The hardest part was the collar. Marcus had to be incredibly careful not to hurt the dragon's neck as he worked to separate the metal from the wounded flesh. The dragon remained perfectly still, seeming to understand that Marcus was trying to help. Finally, with a sound like breaking glass, the collar came free. The dragon immediately lifted its head higher than it had been able to in what must have been months. Those golden eyes now held something new: hope. Marcus sat back on his heels, breathing hard. His hands were bloody, his clothes were torn, and he had no idea what he was going to do with a baby alien dragon. But as the creature struggled to its feet and nuzzled his hand with gratitude, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The dragon was weak and wounded, but alive. And somehow Marcus knew his life had just changed forever. The strange humming in the air grew louder, and Marcus looked up to see lights moving across the night sky. They weren't planes or helicopters. They were searching for something. They were searching for the dragon. Marcus made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. He scooped up the dragon in his arms, surprised by how light it was, and headed for home. Whatever was hunting this creature, they wouldn't find it. Not if he had anything to say about it. The dragon curled against his chest, its scales warming for the first time in months. For the first time since its capture, it felt safe. It didn't know yet that it had just met the most dangerous species in the galaxy. It had met a human who cared. The beings that emerged from the ships were nothing like the movies had prepared humanity for. The Kethvar stood 8 feet tall on 6 legs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Their bodies were covered in what looked like living metal, shifting and flowing like liquid mercury. Most disturbing were their faces, or rather, the lack of them. Where features should have been, there was only smooth metal that occasionally opened to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. 4 Kethvar approached Marcus's house while others remained by their ships, weapons visible but not raised. The crowd of reporters and onlookers pressed back instinctively, some running entirely. Only Marcus remained seated on his porch steps, Cosmos beside him, both refusing to show fear. The lead Kethvar stopped 10 feet away and spoke without moving any visible mouth, its voice emanating from somewhere deep within its metallic body. "Human child, you possess stolen property of the collective. Return the dragon spawn immediately." Agent Morrison stepped between Marcus and the alien. "Now hold on. This is United States territory and we don't recognize your authority to—" The Kethvar didn't even look at him. One of its companions raised a device that looked like a crystalline rod. Agent Morrison simply stopped existing. No flash, no sound, no trace that he had ever been there except for confused murmurs from the crowd. "This is not a negotiation with your primitive government," the leader said calmly. "This is retrieval of property. Return what was stolen." Marcus felt Cosmos tremble beside him, but he kept his voice steady. "Cosmos isn't property. He's a person. A friend." The lead Kethvar's head tilted in what might have been confusion. "Friend? Impossible. Dragons are weapons, tools. They do not form attachments to lesser species." "Lesser species?" Marcus stood up, feeling anger override his fear. "You chained up a child and left him to die. What makes you think you're better than anyone?" "We are Kethvar," the being replied, as if that explained everything. "We take what we require. The weak exist to serve the strong. This is natural law." Cosmos stepped forward, scales blazing with silver fire. "You are wrong," the dragon said, its voice carrying surprising authority. "Strength without compassion is not strength. It is just cruelty with power." The Kethvar leader made a sound like grinding metal. "The weapon speaks? Impossible. Collar protocols should have prevented linguistic development." "The collar is gone," Marcus said. "I removed it." "Removed it?" Another Kethvar stepped forward, this one carrying scanning equipment. "Impossible. Kethvar restraints are molecularly bonded. They cannot be removed without killing the subject." "I used bolt cutters and determination," Marcus replied. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you actually care about someone." The scanner-bearing Kethvar ran its device over Cosmos, then made chittering sounds of distress. "The readings are unprecedented. The dragon's life force has increased by 847%. Cellular regeneration is occurring at impossible rates. How?" Marcus looked down at Cosmos, who was now glowing softly in the afternoon sunlight. "I took care of him. Fed him, healed his wounds, made sure he felt safe." "Apparently that's something you guys never tried." "Care?" The leader's voice carried what might have been disgust. "Emotional attachment to livestock is inefficient, counterproductive." "Cosmos isn't livestock," Marcus said firmly. "He's my friend. And I'm not giving him back to people who see him as a tool." The leader raised its own weapon, a device that hummed with barely contained energy. "You will comply, or your species will be reduced to base elements." That's when Marcus's mother stepped out of the house behind him. Dr. Sarah Chen was a small woman who spent her days helping injured animals, but her voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Put that weapon down this instant," she commanded. The Kethvar turned its attention to her. "Another human. Your spawn has contaminated valuable property. You will be held responsible." "My son," Dr. Chen said firmly, "rescued a tortured child from dying in an alley. If that contaminated anything, it was your barbaric treatment methods." She walked to stand beside Marcus, placing a protective hand on Cosmos's head. The dragon leaned into her touch, scales shifting to warm amber. "Look at him," she continued. "Really look. When Marcus found him, he was broken, starving, barely alive. Now he's healthy, growing, learning. This is what proper care looks like." The scanning Kethvar made more chittering sounds. "Biological markers indicate pack bonding, familial attachment. This is outside all parameters." Marcus's father appeared in the doorway, holding a baseball bat that would be useless against alien technology, but which somehow made Marcus feel better anyway. "Let me get this straight. David Chen said, his accountant's mind working through the situation methodically. You people steal children, torture them, and sell them as slaves. My son rescued one of your victims and nursed him back to health, and now you want us to hand him over so you can torture him some more. The dragon is property of the collective, the leader replied. Its welfare is irrelevant. Wrong answer, David said, stepping out to join his family. More neighbors began emerging from their houses, Mrs. Patterson from next door, carrying her garden hose like a weapon. The Johnsons from across the street, their teenage sons flanking them. The retired Marine from the corner house, his bearing straight despite his age. None of them had weapons that could hurt the Kethvar. All of them positioned themselves between the aliens and Marcus's family anyway. The lead Kethvar made sounds of confusion to its companions. This behavior is irrational. They cannot protect the human child. They gain nothing from this confrontation except death. Old Mr. Rodriguez spoke up from the crowd. Kid, you got any more friends who need rescuing? Because this neighborhood doesn't tolerate bullies. The Kethvar's weapon hummed louder. You will all cease this interference immediately. That's when Cosmos did something that changed everything. The young dragon stepped forward, spread his healing wings wide, and spoke in a voice that carried clearly to every news camera and microphone. I choose to stay with Marcus. I choose to be part of his family. I choose to protect them as they protected me. His scales blazed with golden light. And if you try to take me, you will discover why the galaxy whispers about humans in the dark. The lead Kethvar paused, weapon still raised. What do you mean, whispers about humans? Cosmos smiled, showing teeth that gleamed like silver flames. Ask yourself why you had to come here personally instead of sending subordinates. Ask why your scanner readings make no sense. Ask why a species that has never left its homeworld already has a reputation among the stars. The scanner-bearing Kethvar chittered frantically to the leader. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakably worried. Impossible, the leader said finally. Humans are primitive, technologically inferior. They have no space presence, no weapons capable of threatening us. No, Cosmos agreed, his voice carrying strange harmonics that made the air itself seem to listen. They have something much more dangerous than weapons. They have love, and love, as your own scanners are telling you, can accomplish the impossible. The standoff stretched on, alien weapons trained on a teenage boy and his dragon while the entire world watched. Neither side would back down. But Marcus was beginning to understand something that the Kethvar were not. This wasn't really about Cosmos anymore. This was about what humanity would choose to be when faced with the galaxy's cruelty, and Marcus had already chosen. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but the universe had other plans. High above Earth's atmosphere, something massive began to decloak. The Kethvar leader's head snapped upward as its communication device crackled to life. The voice that emerged spoke in the same chittering language the aliens had been using among themselves, but now it carried tones of panic. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but Cosmos could. The dragon's scales shifted to deep blue. The color Marcus had learned meant sadness mixed with hope. What are they saying? Marcus whispered. The Galactic Council fleet has arrived, Cosmos replied quietly. 12 dreadnoughts. The Kethvar ship commanders are concerned. The lead Kethvar made rapid chittering sounds into its device, then turned back to Marcus. For the first time, its voice carried uncertainty. This changes nothing. The dragon remains property of the collective. But even as it spoke, more voices filled the air. This time they spoke in perfect English, broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. Attention, Kethvar vessels. This is Fleet Admiral HFY of the Galactic Council. You are in violation of Council Resolution 2847, the prohibition against slave hunting in protected systems. Withdraw immediately. The scanner-bearing Kethvar made distressed sounds. Protected systems? Earth is not listed in any protected zone registry. A new voice joined the broadcast, this one carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. Classification was updated 47 minutes ago, following emergency council session. Earth is now under formal council protection. Marcus looked at Cosmos in confusion. Protected? Why? The dragon's scales shifted to warm silver. Because of what you did. Because you proved something the galaxy thought was impossible. I don't understand. Cosmos stood and addressed the crowd, knowing his words were being broadcast across the world. Dragons are not native to just one world. We come from Draconis Prime. a planet the Kethvar destroyed 300 years ago. They killed our parents, stole our eggs, raised us as weapons and slaves. The dragon's voice grew stronger as he continued. For 3 centuries, no dragon has ever been freed from Kethvar control. Their collars, their conditioning, their cruelty, it was supposed to be unbreakable. But Marcus broke it, not with technology or weapons or force. He broke it with something the Kethvar cannot understand or replicate. What? Agent Morrison's replacement asked. The FBI had sent a new team, though they were keeping their distance after watching their colleague vanish. Love, Cosmos said simply. Pure, unconditional caring. The willingness to sacrifice for someone else without expecting anything in return. The Kethvar have studied every species in the galaxy for thousands of years. Humans are the only ones who do this naturally, instinctively, even for their enemies. The lead Kethvar's weapon lowered slightly. Impossible. Altruism is an evolutionary dead end. Species that waste resources on non-productive individuals cannot survive. Dr. Chen stepped forward. And yet here we are. Thriving. Happy. And apparently impressive enough that 12 warships showed up to protect us. The council voice spoke again, this time addressing the crowd directly. People of Earth, I am Admiral HFY. 3 hours ago, the Galactic Council received a data packet from your planet. Video footage of a human child freeing a dragon from Kethvar restraints. The implications of this act have sent shockwaves through every civilized world. Marcus felt his cheeks burn as he realized the news footage had somehow reached alien governments. It wasn't that big a deal. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Admiral HFY replied gently. That is what makes your species so remarkable. You believe anyone would show such kindness. In reality, in all our databases spanning 50,000 years of galactic history, no other species has ever successfully freed a Kethvar slave. The psychological conditioning was considered absolute. Cosmos nuzzled against Marcus's leg. I tried to die when the collar was first put on. The pain, the hopelessness, it was too much. But something kept me alive. The Kethvar said it was their conditioning, but they were wrong. Then what was it? Marcus asked. Prophecy, Cosmos said softly. Dragon elders used to tell stories about the Guardians, a mythical species that would someday appear to free us from slavery. They would be physically weak but spiritually strong. They would value others above themselves. They would fight for strangers without reward. The dragon looked up at Marcus with eyes full of wonder. The Kethvar thought the prophecies were just stories we told ourselves to maintain hope. They were wrong. The scanner-bearing Kethvar made panicked, chittering sounds. Scans of the human population are showing impossible readings. Baseline empathy levels are 300% above galactic norms. Willingness to sacrifice for others is unmeasurable. Admiral HFY's voice carried amusement. Indeed, Earth's protection status was unanimous. Even the Warhawk species voted yes. Nobody wants to antagonize a species capable of breaking Kethvar conditioning through sheer kindness. The lead Kethvar's weapon lowered further. This is irrational. One human child freed one dragon. This proves nothing about the species as a whole, doesn't it? Marcus's father asked. He gestured to the crowd of neighbors still standing between the aliens and his family. Nobody here has superpowers. Nobody here is particularly brave or special. But every single one of them chose to stand up to beings with superior technology because they thought it was right. Mrs. Patterson raised her garden hose defiantly. Damn right we did. And we'd do it again. The lead Kethvar made sounds of confusion to its scanner companion. The response was a series of rapid chittering that grew increasingly agitated. What are they saying now? Marcus asked Cosmos. Their computers are analyzing human behavior patterns from your global communication networks. Cosmos translated. Stories, movies, news reports, social media posts. They are finding the same pattern everywhere. Humans who risk themselves for others. Humans who adopt orphaned animals. Humans who donate to charities for people they will never meet. Humans who jump into rivers to save drowning strangers. The scanner-bearer's chittering reached a fevered pitch before suddenly cutting off. When it spoke in English, its voice carried something Marcus had never heard from a Kethvar before. Fear. Analysis complete. This species exhibits universal protective instincts extending beyond genetic relatives. They form emotional bonds with other species. They create social structures designed to protect the weak rather than eliminate them. It paused, as if struggling to process the data. They teach their children that cruelty is wrong. Of course we do. Dr. Chen said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. What kind of civilization would we be if we didn't? A normal one, the lead Kethvar replied flatly. Every other species in the galaxy teaches their young to survive, to compete, to dominate. Your species teaches them to protect others, even at cost to themselves? Marcus thought about his childhood, about bedtime stories where heroes saved the day not through strength but through sacrifice, about cartoons where the good guys always tried to redeem the villains, about teachers who told him that the strongest people were those who stood up for others who couldn't defend themselves. Yeah, he said simply, that's what being human means. Admiral Zephai's voice carried what sounded like amazement. Kethvar delegation, your own scanners confirm what our observers have long suspected. Humanity represents a new paradigm in galactic evolution. They are the first species to successfully weaponize compassion. Weaponize, the lead Kethavar's voice sharp with interest. Consider the facts, the Admiral continued. In 3 hours, Marcus Chen has accomplished what our combined fleets could not achieve in 3 centuries. He has not only freed a dragon from your control but transformed it into something unprecedented. Your own scans show the creature's power levels are beyond anything in your databases. Marcus looked down at Cosmos, who was indeed glowing brighter than ever before. The dragon's scales had taken on an opalescent quality that seemed to contain entire galaxies. I am stronger, Cosmos confirmed quietly. Stronger than any dragon in recorded history. The healing Marcus gave me did not just repair my body. It awakened something that was always there but suppressed by your tortures. We call it the Guardian Bond. The scanner bearer made distressed sounds. Guardian Bond is myth, legend, impossible to achieve. Impossible for you, Cosmos corrected. Because it requires something you have never possessed. It requires love freely given and freely received. It requires trust absolute and hope unbroken. Marcus gave me these things without even knowing what he was doing. The young dragon spread his wings and Marcus gasped. They were no longer the torn, damaged things he had tended to for weeks. They were magnificent, spanning nearly 20 feet, with membranes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. And now, Cosmos continued, I am bound to Marcus and his family not as property or pet, but as guardian. I will protect them with power beyond your comprehension, because they protected me when I was helpless. The lead Kethvar stepped backward. Guardian Bond grants dragons abilities that defy physics, matter manipulation, energy projection, temporal perception. You could destroy our ships. I could, Cosmos agreed calmly. But I will not. Because Marcus taught me that strength is meant to protect, not to destroy. Even enemies can be redeemed if shown a better. 6 months later, Marcus barely recognized his life. The small suburban house that had once been his quiet refuge was now the unofficial embassy of humanity to the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species came to study what the Council had termed the Chen Protocol, though Marcus still insisted he had just done what anyone would do. Cosmos had grown into his full size, now standing nearly as tall as Marcus at the shoulder. His scales had settled into a permanent pattern that looked like a map of the night sky, complete with moving constellations that told stories in ancient dragon lore. But more importantly, he was happy. The trauma of his captivity was healing, replaced by joy in simple things like flying with wild geese or helping Dr. Chen tend to injured animals at her veterinary clinic. The Kethvar ships had never left Earth's orbit. Instead, they had sent down shuttles carrying what they called observers, Kethvar who volunteered to study human behavior firsthand. The results had been unprecedented. Marcus found observer Keth9 in the backyard, carefully tending to his mother's vegetable garden. The alien's metallic features had begun developing something that resembled facial expressions, and it had taken to wearing a sun hat that Dr. Chen had insisted on to protect its photosensitive optical sensors. Good morning. 9, Marcus said, using the shortened name the Kethvar had chosen for easier human pronunciation. Good morning, Marcus, 9 replied, its voice now carrying warmth instead of the cold mechanical tone of their first encounter. The tomatoes are showing excellent growth patterns. Your mother's cultivation techniques are remarkably efficient. Marcus smiled. 9 had been the scanner bearer from that first confrontation. It had volunteered to stay on Earth specifically to understand how humans maintained agricultural systems designed to feed others rather than just themselves. The concept of growing extra food to give away had broken several of 9's fundamental assumptions about resource allocation. Mom will be happy to hear that. She's been worried about the late frost. Nine's features shifted, and what Marcus had learned was the Kethvar equivalent of confusion. Worried? The statistical probability of crop failure is only 12.7%. This is well within acceptable parameters. Yeah, but these tomatoes aren't just for us, Marcus explained patiently. She's planning to give most of them to the food bank downtown. If they don't grow well, people go hungry. Nine went very still, which Marcus recognized as the alien equivalent of deep thought. After 6 months of observation, the Kethvar was still struggling to understand human motivations that extended beyond immediate survival needs. The humans who would receive these tomatoes, Nine said slowly, they are not genetically related to your family. Unit, nope. They provide no services or resources to your household. Nope. They cannot reciprocate the gift or offer any benefit to your family's survival. That's not the point. Nine. The Kethvar made a sound like grinding gears, its equivalent of a frustrated sigh. Then what is the point, Marcus? Our analysis teams have been studying human behavior for 182 days, and we still cannot understand the logical basis for this resource distribution pattern. Marcus sat on the back steps, watching Nine carefully adjust a plant stake. The point is that they're hungry and we have food. That's all the reason we need. But why do you care if strangers are hungry? It was a question Nine asked in various forms almost daily. Marcus had tried dozens of different explanations, but he was beginning to understand that it wasn't a logical problem. It was an experiential one. Come with me, Marcus said suddenly. I want to show you something. They walked to downtown with Cosmos flying overhead. The dragon had become something of a local celebrity, though he was careful to maintain enough altitude to avoid disrupting traffic. Children would wave at him from school playgrounds, and he would write messages in the clouds with carefully controlled puffs of silver flame. Marcus led Nine to St. Mary's Soup Kitchen, where his mother volunteered twice a week. The alien had observed the facility before, but always from a distance, treating it like a laboratory specimen. Marcus called Sister Agnes, an elderly nun who ran the kitchen. Perfect timing. We just got a donation of fresh bread, but we're running low on vegetables for the stew. Nine brought tomatoes, Marcus said, gesturing to the Kethvar, who was carrying a basket of his perfectly cultivated vegetables. The nun's face lit up. Wonderful! Your tomatoes are always so beautiful. The guests will be delighted. Nine carefully handed over the basket, its movement still uncertain in social situations. Sister Agnes accepted it with a grateful smile that seemed to physically impact the alien observer. Thank you so much, she said warmly. You have no idea how much this means to people who haven't had a decent meal in days. Nine watched Sister Agnes carry the tomatoes into the kitchen, where volunteers immediately began washing and preparing them. Through the serving window, the alien could see dozens of people waiting in line. Families with children, elderly individuals, people whose circumstances had reduced them to dependence on charity. Observe, Marcus said quietly. Really observe. Don't analyze or categorize. Just watch. So Nine watched. It watched Sister Agnes personally serve each person with dignity and kindness. It watched volunteers who had finished their own jobs stay late to help wash dishes. It watched a businessman in an expensive suit quietly leave an envelope of cash before slipping away without seeking recognition. But most importantly, Nine watched the faces of the people eating the stew made with its tomatoes. Children who smiled for the first time in weeks. Parents whose shoulders straightened with relief. Elderly people who lingered at their tables not because they were still hungry, but because this might be their only social interaction of the day. The tomatoes I grew, Nine said slowly, are causing those expressions of satisfaction. Joy, Marcus corrected. They're not just satisfied. They're experiencing joy because someone cared enough to make sure they had good food. Nine was quiet for a long time, watching the simple miracle of shared meals and human kindness. And you receive no compensation for this joy creation? The joy is the compensation, Nine. Seeing other people happy makes us happy. That's how humans work. Something shifted in Nine's metallic features. For the first time since arriving on Earth, the alien looked less like a machine and more like a person experiencing wonder. I think I am beginning to understand, Nine said carefully. The resource expenditure is not waste. It is investment. Investment in joy creation? In community, Marcus said. In making the world a little better. In being the kind of person you can be proud of being. That evening, 9 sent its first personal report back to the Kethvar fleet. Instead of the usual tactical and resource analysis, it wrote something unprecedented, a request for more volunteers to study what it called joy creation protocols. The response was immediate. 17 more Kethvar requested permission to come to Earth, but the real change began 2 weeks later, when 9 made an announcement that shocked both species. "I wish to remain on Earth permanently," 9 told the assembled human and alien representatives. "I wish to learn to be what you call happy. I wish to contribute to joy creation rather than just observe it." It was the first time in recorded galactic history that a Kethvar had requested asylum from its own species. The fleet admiral's response came 12 hours later. "Permission granted. Kethvar Collective is curious about your development." Marcus found 9 in the garden that night, staring up at the stars where its people waited in their ships. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. 9 considered the question with its usual careful deliberation. "I've been Kethvar for 847 years. I have never experienced joy creation until this week. I have never understood why other beings smile. I have never wanted to make someone else's day better." It paused. "How could I regret learning to be happy?" Above them, Cosmos landed gracefully on the grass. "The fleet received some interesting news today," the dragon said, scales shifting to cheerful gold. 3 more species have requested council protection to study human behavior. They want to learn what the Kethvar are learning. Marcus looked up at the alien ships that had once come to take his friend away. Now they were staying to learn something he had never realized was special: how to care about each other. "Think it will spread?" Marcus asked. Cosmos smiled, an expression that had once been impossible for his kind. "Love always spreads, Marcus. That's what makes it the most powerful force in the universe." High above, in the Kethvar ships, dozens of other observers were writing their own reports about the impossible humans and their weaponized compassion, and across the galaxy the whispers were growing louder. The humans had done the impossible again. They were teaching their enemies how to be happy. 5 years after first contact, Marcus stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council had expanded its chambers 3 times to accommodate representatives from over 1,000 species, many of whom had never spoken to each other before humans had shown them it was possible. Marcus was 21 now, a college student studying xenobiology and interspecies psychology, fields that had been created specifically to understand what humans had accomplished. But today he wasn't here as a student or expert. He was here as the human who had started everything. Cosmos stood beside him, now fully grown and magnificent beyond words. The dragon's scales reflected the light from 100 different suns, and his presence radiated the calm authority that came from absolute trust in his bond with Marcus. But he wasn't alone. 17 other dragons stood with him, former slaves from across the galaxy who had been freed using the protocols Marcus had accidentally developed. 9 sat in the front row of observers, no longer the cold machine that had once threatened Earth. The former Kethvar had learned to smile, though it took considerable effort to manipulate its metallic features. It wore a small pin that read, "Honorary Human," a gift from Marcus's neighborhood that 9 treasured above all possessions. "Honored delegates," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. 5 years ago, I found a dying dragon in an alley. I took him home because it seemed like the right thing to do. I had no idea that simple act would change everything." A ripple of approval moved through the assembled beings. In the 5 years since the Chen incident, as historians were calling it, the galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The Kethvar Collective has officially disbanded their slave trading operations. Marcus continued. Their former hunting fleets now serve as rescue ships, seeking out enslaved beings across the galaxy and offering them freedom. Over 50,000 individuals have been liberated using what we call the Guardian Protocol. In the Kethvar section, former Admiral Keth Prime stood and spoke in its newly learned emotional tones. "The collective wishes to formally apologize to all species we have wronged. We are learning that strength used to protect rather than dominate creates more joy than we ever imagined possible." The chamber erupted in approving sounds from dozens of species. The transformation of the Kethvar from galactic tyrants to protectors was still shocking to those who remembered their reign of terror. But the changes went far beyond one reformed species. The Rigelian Trade Federation has restructured its entire economy around fair compensation rather than exploitation, Marcus continued. The Zeta Reticuli Alliance has opened their borders to refugees for the first time in their history. 3 former warring coalitions have signed permanent peace treaties based on human conflict resolution techniques. Admiral HFY stood from the Council leadership podium. The statistics are remarkable. Galaxy-wide conflict has decreased by 78% since the introduction of human diplomatic methods. Trade prosperity has increased by 245%. Most significantly, psychological wellness indicators have improved across all measured species. Cosmos stepped forward, his voice carrying the harmonics that all dragons had learned to use for public speaking. Humans showed us something we thought was myth. They proved that love is not weakness, but the greatest strength in the universe. They proved that protecting others makes you stronger, not weaker. They proved that joy shared is joy multiplied. In the audience, a small being from Proxima Centauri raised a tentacled appendage. Question for the human delegate. How do we know these changes will last? How do we know kindness won't fail when faced with real challenges? Marcus had heard this question many times over the years. It was always asked by species who had survived through competition and conflict, who found it hard to believe that cooperation could be sustainable. Because kindness isn't just nice, Marcus replied. It's practical. When people feel safe and valued, they work harder, innovate more, and contribute their best. When societies protect their weakest members, they unlock potential that would otherwise be lost. When species cooperate instead of compete, everyone prospers. 9 stood from its seat. If I may offer testimony, the former Kethavar said. Our old ways produced fear, anger, and constant conflict. Our new ways produce what humans call happiness. Happiness is more efficient than fear. It requires less energy to maintain and produces better results in all measurable categories. Dr. Chen, now serving as Earth's official ambassador to the Galactic Council, stepped forward. The medical data supports this completely. Species that have adopted human social protocols show improved physical health, longer lifespans, and increased mental acuity. Love, as it turns out, is good medicine. A crystalline being from the Andromeda sector chimed in musical tones. Our youth are learning human stories and songs. For the first time in our species' history, our children dream of helping others rather than defeating them. They speak of wanting to be heroes like the humans in their stories. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what had started with a simple act of kindness. The thing is, he said slowly, humans aren't actually special. We just happened to evolve in a way that made cooperation feel natural. But every species here has the capacity for the same compassion we showed Cosmos. You've all proven that by changing. A familiar figure stood in the back of the chamber. Agent Morrison's replacement, now serving as head of Earth's Galactic Relations Department. The question now is where we go from here. Humanity stands ready to share everything we've learned about building compassionate societies, but we're also here to learn from all of you. The chamber buzzed with excited conversations in dozens of languages as species that had never cooperated began planning joint ventures and cultural exchanges. Admiral HFY called for order. Before we conclude, there is one final matter. The Council has voted unanimously on a new resolution. She paused dramatically. Resolution 3847, the Marcus Chen Principle. Henceforth, any being who shows extraordinary compassion to another species shall be granted automatic Council protection and citizenship. Acts of kindness that transcend species boundaries will be recognized as the highest form of galactic service. The chamber erupted in celebration. Marcus felt tears running down his cheeks as beings from across the galaxy stood to applaud not just him, but the simple idea that kindness mattered. That night, back on Earth, Marcus sat in his backyard with Cosmos and 9, watching the stars. The alien ships were gone now. Their occupants had built permanent settlements on Earth and dozens of other worlds, creating the first truly integrated galactic communities. Any regrets? 9 asked, echoing the question Marcus had once asked it. Marcus looked at his dragon friend, now bonded to him for life, and at the former enemy who had become like family. He thought of all the beings across the galaxy who were free because someone had decided to care. Only one, Marcus said finally. I regret that it took so long for everyone to figure out what humans have always known. What's that? Cosmos asked, scales shifting to curious blue. Marcus smiled, remembering the scared, chained dragon he had found in an alley 5 years ago. That love is the strongest force in the universe, and when you use it to help others, it just keeps growing. Above them, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was smiling. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, beings who had once known only conflict were learning to choose compassion instead. It had started with a human schoolboy who couldn't walk past a suffering creature. It had become a revolution that changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in its history, that was a good thing. In the end, the most powerful weapon humanity had ever created was the simple belief that everyone deserved kindness. Even enemies. Even monsters. Even beings from across the void who had come to steal and destroy. Because sometimes, the best way to defeat your enemies is to show them how to become your friends. The age of human compassion had begun, and the universe was finally learning how to be happy.